everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at the state of Wisconsin in the 2022 midterms. Wisconsin has a Senate race and governor race up this November, and the polls have them both as very close races. Before I get into it, I'd like to say if you like my content, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell and leave a like and comment. With that said, let's get into it. So Wisconsin has a few key races up, including their Senate race, which I'll talk about first. Incumbent Republican Senator Ron Johnson is running for a third term against Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. This is one of the Democrats' main targets to expand their Senate majority, and if we look at the polls, it's understandable why. In the Real Clear Politics average, Johnson's only up by 1.5 points, which is in the margin of error, and he isn't getting 50% in any polls. So this race is seen as very close. In fact, this race is the closest Republican seat to flipping according to polls other than Pennsylvania. However, I don't really think that's the case, that this is going to be very competitive. Polling all over the country has been horrible for the last few cycles, and Wisconsin is one of the worst cases of polling error. In 2020, Biden was up in the state by 6.7% in the polling average, but he only ended up winning by 0.7, which is way out of the margin of error. 2016 was a similar story if we look at it, where Hillary Clinton was leading by 6.5 in the polling average, and Trump actually ended up winning the state by around the same margin as Biden's 2020 victory. Speaking of 2016, if we look at the polls for Johnson's Senate race in 2016, we see that he was never even leading in the polling averages. In fact, if we look at polls 6 years ago this time, Johnson was down by almost 10 points, and he ended up winning by over 3 points. He won by 3.4. The polling average ultimately did get a little bit closer right at the end, but it still underestimated him by over 5 points. So if we go back and look at the current polling average, Johnson being up by 1.5 points may make it seem like this race is close, but it's actually the first time Johnson has ever led the polling average, and it's the first time a Republican has led statewide in the polling average since Scott Walker's reelection campaign for governor in 2014, and even that underestimated him by a couple points. If we assume that there's a similar polling error to the last couple cycles in this state, Johnson is probably up big, and I think that he is up by a relatively big margin. In my opinion, I think Johnson's probably up by around 4 to 5 points, because even polling firms that had Biden up big in 2020 are showing Johnson up this time around, and even 538's horrible model has Johnson favored narrowly. And as you can see, Johnson's been surging in the polls lately. Over the summer, Barnes was up in every single poll, but in September, Johnson's taken the lead in almost every poll. And I assume his numbers are only going to climb as the election grows closer. The Senate race is really only half the story in Wisconsin this November. There's also a competitive gubernatorial election happening, in which Tony Evers, the incumbent Democratic governor, is running against businessman Tim Michels. This race is generally considered to be more favorable to Democrats than the Senate race, and I definitely agree with that, but I do think it's more competitive than people are giving it credit for. Looking at the Real Clear Politics polling average for this governor's race, we can see that Evers is leading by 2.2, meaning he's running about 3.5 points ahead of Mandela Barnes. Individual polls show this race being more favorable to Democrats than the Senate by around 1 to 5 points, but like the Senate race, numbers have been better for Michels in the month of September because Michels led his first poll, the Trafalgar poll, and the other polls have mostly narrowed. And a lot of people do discount Trafalgar because they had Trump up in many places that he lost in 2020, but it is important to keep in mind that they actually underestimated him in Wisconsin, not only in 2020, but also in 2016. They had him losing when he actually won. So Trafalgar does actually tend to underestimate Democrats or underestimate Republicans in the state of Wisconsin. The reasons for this race being more favorable to Democrats is pretty obvious. The race has a Democratic incumbent, while the Senate race has a Republican incumbent, so the advantage goes opposite ways in each race. But polling is still showing that this is close. I will touch on the fact that the gubernatorial polling in 2018 was fairly accurate, but that's mostly because Marquette was the only firm that had Walker up or had it tied. All the other polls overestimated Evers. They had him up by 8, 5, and 2, and he only won by a little over 1 point. Wisconsin just seems to be a place where the polls consistently overestimate Democrats, and Wisconsin is notoriously hard to poll. Because of the polling error in the past, I currently believe Michels will narrowly win, though I do think Johnson will win by a much larger margin. The state of Wisconsin as a whole has been trending Republican pretty quickly. If we look at the 2008 results in the state, Obama won this seat or won the state by almost 14, and then in 2012, he won the state by 7, even with Paul Ryan, who's from Wisconsin, on the ticket. Then in 2016, as I mentioned before, Trump did narrowly win the state. And of course, Biden did narrowly flip the state in 2020. But, the national environment shifted way against Trump. I think it shifted over 2 points against Trump, but Wisconsin only shifted about 1.5 points against Trump. And so it actually trended right compared to the national environment, which is suggesting that Wisconsin is becoming even more out of reach for Democrats. Biden only barely won the state when he won the popular vote by over 4 points, when Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 2 points and just came short in the state. So the state is becoming more right compared to the nation as a whole, and it'll be a lot more obvious to say, how trends are affecting the Senate and governor races after this cycle. But for now, I do think that Republicans are favored in both races. That's all I really have to say about Wisconsin for now. If you liked the video, leave a like and subscribe and comment telling me what you think. Thank you for watching and have a great day.